Hey guys, this is Coach Lowe, and this is Contextual Geometry, and we are going to talk about rectangles, rhombi, and squares. Rhombi is the plural for rhombus. So rectangles, rhombi, and squares, 8-4. All right, and we're going to kind of separate this a little bit. So in 8-4, let's talk about rectangles first. And on the green foldable that you've put in your notebook, the first section was parallelograms. The second section, you should have a rectangle drawn on there already on the outside. So let's put some things on the inside for rectangles. All right, so a couple of things that we know about rectangles. First, they're parallelograms, right? So opposite sides are parallel. All the things that you have on that first green flap for parallelograms also apply to rectangles. All right, but special thing about rectangles, and if you didn't do this on the outside of your green foldable where you have a rectangle drawn, we know that all four angles in a rectangle are right angles. So open the flap, and we need to put 4 right angles. All right. We also know that the diagonals are congruent. All right. So in a parallelogram, if we know that it's a parallelogram, it has 4 right angles, we know it's a rectangle. If we have a parallelogram and the diagonals are congruent, we know that it's a rectangle. All the properties that we put down for a parallelogram on that first flap apply to rectangles. So let's talk about those things just as a reminder. Opposite sides are congruent. So I know it looks like this. Opposite sides are parallel to each other. We know that. We also know that opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary. We can see that since they're all 90, that makes it kind of nice. The diagonals bisect each other. So if I draw diagonals here, they are going to bisect each other. And I also know that a diagonal cuts a parallelogram, which, like I said, a rectangle is a parallelogram. Diagonal cuts that parallelogram into 2 equal pieces. So lots of things that I know about rectangles that we already knew about parallelograms. These 2 items right here separate, so lots of parallelograms, small section of rectangles. Parallelograms have to have these 2 things to be a rectangle. All right, so put these 2 things on the inside of the green flap. So when you open that little window that says rectangles and it has a rectangle picture drawn on the outside, open that up. 4 right angles, and the diagonals are congruent to each other. All right, so let's continue to talk about rectangles. If I give you a picture and I ask you if it is a rectangle, you should be able to tell me yes or no. So this is rectangle ABCD, where AB is congruent to CD and BC is congruent to AD and BC is congruent to CD. So is this a rectangle or no? Well, opposite sides are congruent to each other and consecutive sides. So I know all of these sides are congruent, but I'm missing a piece. All the sides being congruent to each other does not make this a rectangle. I have to have right angles or they have to tell me the diagonals are congruent. So if I do this, if I just give you one, do I know that all 4 are right angles? Well, if they tell me this is a parallelogram, then I know opposite angles are congruent and consecutive angles. Remember, if we go around, it's the next one as I hop over here. Consecutive angles are supplementary. I didn't tell you it was a parallelogram to start with. So you have to be careful. Look at the information that they give you and then use what you know about, say, if they say this is a parallelogram, use what you know about parallelograms and take the information that they've given you and decide from there. But I really didn't give you enough information so that you could say yes on this one. So this would be not enough info, which means no, it's not. There's not enough information to prove that it is a rectangle. So you have to say no, it's not. All right. Next thing, let's talk about rhombi real quick and squares, and let's look at the difference between those and some similarities as well. All right, so go back to your flap, and this should be the third one, squares and rhombi. You should already have a picture drawn on that and the words on that flap. So let's talk about what makes a rhombi or a square unique. All right, so let's talk squares first. And I don't know how you want to do this on your foldable, but all right, so squares. 4 right angles, 4 congruent sides. So all 4 sides are all 4 angles are right angles, all 4 sides are equal to each other. All right, rhombus. Diagonals are perpendicular. So diagonals are perpendicular. That means when they intersect, they form what? Yep, 4 right angles, right? Which means if I'm trying to find a length of one of these sides and they give me 2 of them, I can use Pythagorean theorem because I have a right triangle. All right, and then also diagonals bisect opposite angles. The diagonals bisect a pair of opposite angles. All right, so that means this diagonal cuts this angle into 2 congruent pieces. Same here. All right, same here, same here. All right, so those are the special things about the rhombus. All right, so let me give you a rhombus here and let's check it out. All right, so go ahead and draw your diagonals in. All right, first question, which angle is congruent to angle 1? Or angles? Which angles, if this is a rhombus, okay, this is a rhombus, which angles are congruent to angle 1? Well, I know angles 1 and 2 are congruent to each other. Have any other ones? If I do parallel lines cut by a transversal, 2 and 6 are congruent, which makes 6 and 5 congruent. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. It's also congruent to angle 6. It's also congruent to angle 5. So as I run through this one, I could actually mark this with just one. They're going to bisect a pair of opposite angles. So bisects both of these. Same thing here. Bisects that one, bisects this one. All right. If the measure of angle 7, continuing with this parallelogram down here, rhombus, in fact, the measure of angle 7 is 35. The measure of angle 7 is 35. Could you find the measure of angle AD, as in dog, C? The measure of angle ADC. That's this angle right here. What's its measure? Yep, 70 degrees. Because these two angles are congruent, I add those two together to get the whole thing, and that would be 35 degrees. All right, so keep these handy. We're going to use these as we look at problems when I see you in class again. Go ahead and put a star in the top left corner of your first page. Star, top left corner, first page. This is Coach Lowe, and I'm out.